Title: Chrono's Fault. Chapter 1: The Device. Liam Turner was an electrical engineer, not a scientist, but he'd always been captivated by the impossible. Yet nothing had challenged his understanding of reality more than the device he held in his hands, a small, palm-sized machine with a faint blue glow, salvaged from a peculiar junk sale. The seller, a cryptic old man with piercing eyes, had called it the paradox compass, though he'd offered no explanation. The device was a mystery, a mishmash of quantum circuits, intricate gyroscopes, and what appeared to be an advanced tachyon sensor. When Liam scanned the parts, he found a strange material embedded in its core, one he couldn't identify but which registered a quantum spin opposite to anything known in physics. Months of research had led him down rabbit holes of theoretical physics and time manipulation. Quantum entanglement, wormholes, Einstein-Rosen bridges, and tachyonic fields, all concepts at the edge of modern science seemed woven into this bizarre artifact. When his mother was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive disease, something inside him snapped. Conventional medicine had no answers, but he was certain that with time, an advanced cure would exist. He couldn't lose her, he just needed more time. So, with little left to lose, he decided to test the device, hoping it might let him travel into the future or past to find a solution. Chapter 2: The Theory of Time Travel. To even attempt a journey through time, he knew he needed to understand its structure. Every piece of literature on theoretical physics he could find explained time as a fourth dimension, in which each moment was connected to others in a sequence. Some scientists believed time was like a river, flowing forward yet potentially redirected through disturbances, eddies, and whirlpools. Others saw it as a block universe, where past, present, and future existed simultaneously, with reality more like a map than a line. Theories about quantum foam also captured Liam's interest. The concept, put forward by physicist John Wheeler, suggested that at a quantum level, spacetime was constantly bubbling and fluctuating. If you could manipulate those bubbles, so-called Planck-scale wormholes, you might theoretically skip through time. The device's tachyon sensor also hinted at another hypothesis. Tachyons were theoretical particles that moved faster than light, which meant that, if they existed, they could travel backward in time. Theoretically, tachyonic fields could allow an object, or person, to exceed the speed of light, creating a closed time-like curve, a loop that would connect past, present, and future. He didn't fully understand it, but he hoped the device would utilize tachyons and quantum tunneling to let him slip between time's folds. The device had a dial and a small screen that flashed with faint coordinates when he powered it on. After months of tinkering, he decoded these coordinates. They represented both time and location, a sort of temporal map. Turning the dial, he selected a time approximately a decade in the past, the year he'd graduated high school. If he could reach that point, he could start tracking down a doctor or researcher who might know about the pioneering treatments he needed. Taking a deep breath, he pressed activate. The basement blurred around him as a dizzying pull yanked at his stomach. The world faded to black. Chapter 3: A Jolt Through Time. When Liam's vision cleared, he was standing on a street he recognized all too well, his childhood neighborhood. He checked his watch, the date read 10 years prior, just as he'd hoped. For a moment, he was filled with awe. Time travel wasn't just theoretical, he'd done it. He held the device tightly, realizing that if he could change the past, maybe he could change the future, too. But something strange happened. A flicker of memory, one he couldn't place, popped into his head, an image of himself running down this same street as a boy. He shook it off, assuming it was just the shock of time travel. What he didn't realize was that each shift in time, even as small as stepping foot in his old neighborhood, was creating temporal interference. In theory, every moment in time was its own quantum state. By stepping out of sync with his original timeline, he was causing a shift in quantum states, a delicate disturbance that would increase with every action he took. "I have to be careful," he muttered, glancing at the device. The temporal stability gauge was hovering dangerously low, a small indicator pulsing red. Chapter 4: the paradox compass and temporal stability. As Liam adjusted to his new surroundings, he noticed something else on the device, a switch labeled quantum anchoring. His research on the device's components had revealed that it operated with quantum computing, entangled particles, and tachyon emissions to stabilize the user within the target timeline. Quantum anchoring, he reasoned, would bind him to a stable moment in his original timeline, effectively making it his home base so he could return without disrupting the flow of time too drastically. The problem? The anchor point had to be carefully chosen and emotionally significant, or the timeline would reject him as an anomaly. He decided to anchor himself to his mother's hospital room in the present, an act that tugged on his heart and on the fabric of time itself, stabilizing his presence but locking him into a path that grew more unstable with every step. Chapter 5, Temporal Anomalies and the Paradox Enforcers. Liam had just reached the high school he attended a decade ago when he began to experience another shift. He glanced around and realized he was no longer in front of his high school but in the middle of a busy street he didn't recognize, surrounded by people who didn't seem to notice him. Checking the device, he saw a warning, temporal anomaly detected. Time was pushing back. His arrival in the past was already causing minor disruptions, creating an echo of realities that were fighting for dominance. And then he saw them, a group of people in sleek uniforms, each with an emblem on their chest, a symbol of an hourglass encircled by two opposing arrows. Time Enforcers, he whispered, recalling a vague reference he'd read in the device's schematics. One of the enforcers, a tall woman with an unyielding expression, stepped forward. Unauthorized time traveler detected. State your purpose. I'm not trying to disrupt anything, Liam said, instinctively gripping the device. I just need to save someone. The woman's gaze softened slightly but remained resolute. Every second you stay here disrupts the quantum field. Time is a delicate balance. If you persist, you'll create paradoxes that could destabilize everything. One of the other enforcers raised a device that emitted a pulse of energy, and suddenly, Liam felt an intense wave of nausea as memories of moments he hadn't lived yet flashed before his eyes. He saw versions of himself he didn't recognize, alternate realities, futures he hadn't yet reached. But then, just as quickly, the enforcers flickered and disappeared, as if repelled by an unseen force. The device in his hand vibrated, pulling him back to his original anchor point. Chapter 6, Quantum Entanglement and the Cost of Time Travel. Back in the hospital room, Liam was momentarily disoriented, his mind reeling from the fragments of alternate futures he'd glimpsed. He realized then that his actions weren't just creating ripples, they were fragmenting his consciousness. Every time he disrupted a quantum state, he was causing a split in reality, creating parallel versions of himself, each taking on a different path, each holding a part of his identity. A line from the inventor's notes echoed in his mind, time travel is not a journey but a fracture. The traveler must be prepared to lose pieces of themselves. But as he looked at his mother's frail form, lying unconscious on the bed, he knew he couldn't stop. If his next jump would be the costliest, then so be it. Chapter 7, The Final Jump. Liam set the coordinates for a date in the near future, 10 years from the present day, hoping he might find a treatment or advanced medical breakthrough there. He activated the device, but this time, it felt different, harder, as if he were fighting against a gravitational pull, the timeline actively resisting him. He landed in a stark, unfamiliar lab, surrounded by advanced medical equipment and unfamiliar faces. He approached a technician, explaining his mother's condition. She looked at him with sympathy and showed him a treatment plan stored on a holographic tablet, explaining that the disease his mother suffered from was now easily treatable. He was flooded with relief, until he noticed that some of his memories felt dim, faded. He glanced at the device, seeing that his temporal stability gauge was almost empty. As he took the information back, he felt fragments of his own identity slipping away, as if bits of his very essence were dissipating. He could remember his mother, but her face blurred in his mind. His childhood memories grew foggy, the faces of friends and family fading into shadows. The device was demanding compensation, a price for tampering with time, for pushing beyond its bounds. He was losing himself with every step. Epilogue, the cost of the Chrono's fault. Liam returned to the hospital, armed with the cure. His mother's condition improved, her life saved, but Liam's face was unfamiliar to her. As he handed over the last piece of the treatment, he realized he couldn't remember why it mattered so much. A nurse found a small note by his mother's bedside, faded but legible, "For Mom. I'll always remember. L." Liam had changed time, but in doing so, he had become a fragment, a shadow, a whisper in the river of time. And so, Liam Turner disappeared, forever entangled in the paradox he'd created, a part of time but no longer a part of history.